Okay, welcome everyone to the WorldTeach webinar event. This is called Discovering Global Classrooms and Communities, focused on our teaching opportunities in Ecuador and Namibia. Thank you for joining us. We have more than 50 listeners on the line from around the world, and we're excited to begin exploring more about our WorldTeach programming. Amongst our listeners, we have some new applicants, those that have just begun their application or have been accepted into a program, and others that are interested in learning more about WorldTeach. My name is Nolan Sutger. I'm the Director of Recruitment, Communications, and Marketing here at WorldTeach. And for me, getting into the kind of international development field, I was a teacher in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil for 4 years from 2010 to 2013. We also have 5 panelists on the line joining us who you'll meet in the next couple minutes. 2 of them are Ecuador and Namibia alums, while the others are our country directors from Ecuador and our program director from Namibia. So thank you everyone for joining us, and let's begin. So as you can see here, we kind of have the agenda for the day, for the evening. We'll spend a few minutes meeting our panelists and learning a bit about their backgrounds. Then we'll get introduced to our Namibia and Ecuador programs, including our partnerships with the Namibian Ministry of Education, and in Ecuador with CEC, which is El Centro de Educación Continua, and ILE, which is the Instituto de Lenguas Extranjeras. Why WorldTeach volunteers are requested, our funding and support of volunteers, and from there we'll focus on teaching. How are placements made? When will you receive them? What teacher, language, and cultural training will you receive during orientation? What sorts of resources will or won't you have in the classroom? We'll discuss the option of a TEFL certification and various cultural and pedagogical challenges that our alumni faced in their schools and in the community. After, we'll discuss living in Ecuador and Namibia. What are the housing placements like? Whom will you be living? What is the monthly stipend? What activities are volunteers involved with outside of the classroom? We'll talk about safety and cultural challenges, and we'll get to hear personal experiences and stories from our alumni and field staff that are here on the line with us. At the end, we'll quickly address volunteer qualifications and the application process before we dedicate time to questions and answers with our panelists. Throughout the webinar, you can submit questions to the chat function that you should see on the bottom of your screen. We have staff on the line here that are ready to answer your questions. We will wait till the end of the webinar to address this as a group, so let's continue. So first on the line, from right here in our Boston office, live, is Brett McSpadden, current program director overseeing a number of our WorldTeach programs. He was a previous country director in Namibia for 2 years and a volunteer for 2 years there as well. Brett, thank you for joining us. Can you please introduce yourself and tell us why you first decided to join WorldTeach as a volunteer and why Namibia?
Yeah, thank you, Nolan. My name is Brett McSpadden. I worked here in the Boston office basically since I came back from Namibia at the end of 2014. I manage Namibia as well as South Africa Summer Program and a few other programs that we have here at WorldTeach. Kind of answer Nolan's questions about what brought me to be a teacher with WorldTeach initially was, kind of was exploring that as a career option. I had graduated with a degree in international studies and kind of knew that education was something that I was interested in, but I also wanted an international experience. And so, one day I just happened to find WorldTeach, and Namibia was leaving pretty soon, and in speaking with the people here at the home office during that time, they kind of pointed me towards Namibia. They needed some volunteers to go there, and it seemed like a good opportunity for me. It worked out really well. I extended my service there in 2012, and then have moved up with WorldTeach over the years, and I guess I could say I'm an expert in Namibia, but I've enjoyed moving here to the home office and seeing how my experience as a volunteer as well as a field director there is really applicable to what I do here in managing programs and working with new partners, that there is a global component to volunteering that I think is very applicable in a lot of ways.
Okay, Brett, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Our next panelist that we have is Lindsay Dudley. Lindsay is coming to us from Quito, Ecuador, after a long day, I think, in training. Lindsay, welcome and thanks for being here, and tell us why you decided to join WorldTeach as a field director and why Ecuador.
Hi everyone, my name is Lindsay, and yes, you are correct, we're in the midst of orientation right now with the group. I actually have experience here in Ecuador as a Peace Corps volunteer, and that's what first brought me here to the country. I worked more in informal education in small towns and communities when I was a volunteer, and went to grad school, got my degree in Latin American Studies, and found myself very much missing Ecuador and looking for a way to get back. I think for me, I really love the educational component and our partnerships with universities here in Ecuador. I think we have very structured site placements for the volunteers, and they get to work with university students, high school students, and also working professionals. So it's really nice to be able to see the impact that the volunteers are having with English education here. And thanks for having me.
Great, thank you, Lindsay. Next on the line, we have Gabriela. Gabriela is new to the WorldTeach family. She is our assistant field director in Ecuador. Gabby, can you please introduce yourself and tell us why you decided to recently join the WorldTeach team in Ecuador?
I have an update from Gabriela. She's unable to connect right now. I think she might be joining us later on the line.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. So Gabby has some questions throughout here, and hopefully she'll be able to join us and be able to speak about her experiences as well as her work with the volunteers currently in Ecuador. So we'll move on to the next panelist, which is Emily Leeser. Emily was in Namibia. Emily, welcome, and can you please introduce yourself and tell us why you first decided to join WorldTeach as a volunteer in 2015 and why Namibia?
Sure. So my name is Emily. It's actually Mauer now. I recently got married, but Leeser is my maiden name. So the reason I got involved with WorldTeach, I was a senior in college and getting ready to graduate, and just knew that I wanted to spend some time abroad, hopefully traveling in some way, but also wanted to, do something that was there's a service component to it as well. And so I kind of narrowed down some different organizations, and WorldTeach really, stood out to me because of the partnerships with, the local ministries of education. I really felt that was important, and just, the value of having the local government there requesting the volunteers and placing us where we were needed most. So as far as Namibia specifically, a lot of it, kind of like Brett mentioned, it came down to some logistical things. The departure date aligned well with my life schedule, and so that's why I ended up in Namibia. And it really was a fantastic, challenging, rewarding experience. And I went into it knowing that I wanted to be involved with nonprofits, eventually in a career, but my year with WorldTeach really kind of narrowed that focus to being involved with education, and so that's what I currently do now. I work for an education nonprofit in the United States, and WorldTeach has continued to have some, influence in my life past. Just the year I spent there, I am working on my master's through UNC, and actually got a $5,000 scholarship through as a WorldTeach alum, which is awesome. And at my current job, we just hired a new person on our team who is another WorldTeach alum. She just got back from the program in Thailand. So it's definitely carried over in a lot of positive ways, more than I could have imagined.
Awesome, Emily. Thank you for sharing that. It was great to actually speak to you a couple weeks ago, and Emily's actually assisting us with some outreach at UNC Chapel Hill next month. So thank you all around, Emily. We appreciate it. Next up, we have an alumni, Lauren Fosnight. Lauren is an RWTV, a returned WorldTeach volunteer from Ecuador in 2015. Lauren, can you please introduce yourself and tell us why you first decided to join WorldTeach as a volunteer and why Ecuador?
Hi. So I joined WorldTeach in 2015 with the Ecuador program because I really wanted to gain some teaching experience after graduation. I knew that I wanted to go into education, and I knew that I wanted to pursue a master's in international educational development, but I wanted to gain some work experience before I did that. So I chose Ecuador specifically because I was a Spanish major in college and wanted to continue working on my Spanish. The dates also aligned well for me as a recent college graduate, and I knew that I really wanted to be working in a university setting. So the Escuela Politécnica Nacional was a really great place to do that. And I also knew that Quito, Ecuador has a really clear dialect of Spanish and is a really great place to learn Spanish, so that really attracted me to the program as well.
Great, Lauren. Thank you so much. So we'll be revisiting our panelists throughout the webinar and asking them various questions about their experience. For right now, as we look, this is the mission of WorldTeach. There's a duality to it. WorldTeach partners with governments and other organizations in low and middle income countries to provide volunteer teachers to meet local needs and promote responsible global citizenship. And the duality exists where there's obviously the experience for the teacher going there and being immersed in a different culture that maybe is new to them, but it's also an exchange of culture and of being people with the local community where you're working. So that's really a part of this two-part mission statement. So we'll start going quickly through WorldTeach in Namibia. In partnership with the Namibian Ministry of Education, WorldTeach Namibia began in 1990. You'll see a list here as to a few of the reasons why our volunteers are requested to teach in Namibia. Namibia gained their independence and outlawed apartheid in 1990, and upon the beginnings of their newly formed state, implemented English as the language of instruction. The ministry invited WorldTeach to help fill teacher gaps and shortages in English, math, science, and ICT, which is information, communication, and technology. Brett, do you want to add anything else on the relationship between WorldTeach and the ministry, or in general, why you think there's a request for our volunteers in Namibia?
I mean, you covered it pretty well. I mean, the only thing I would just add is, like, we've been a very long-time partner with the Ministry of Education. We've really grown with them as an organization and as they've kind of grown their programming. So we've worked in a variety of capacities there, in like teacher resource centers, designing curriculum. Then, you know, there was a need for English-speaking teachers in the classroom, so we started kind of moving into schools individually. In the 2008 or so, the technology WorldTeach was a founding member of a technology kind of cooperative there with the Ministry of Education to implement some computer literacy things, training, and so I think we have a strong partnership. Partnership really sums it up. We have an extremely strong partnership with the Namibian Ministry of Education and have really worked in a variety of capacities and really tried to meet their needs, and I think we've done a good job of that.
Okay, thank you, Brett. Brett is our in-house Namibian guru, having lived there for 4 years, both as a volunteer and a country director, and overseeing the program as well from our U.S. office. So thanks, Brett. We'll move on to Ecuador, and in Ecuador is a little bit of a different model. We partner with a couple of local colleges and universities in Riobamba as well as Quito. This is CEC, SEC, and ILE, so El Centro de Educación Continua, and ILE, Instituto de Lenguas Extranjeras in Ecuador. Over the years, we've worked with various organizations that specifically request and provide funding for our volunteers. We've been in Ecuador since 1991 in different capacities, and these places we currently work would otherwise wouldn't be able to afford native English-speaking teachers. Lindsay, Do you want to address anything on the relationship between WorldTeach and SEC and ILE, and our presence in Ecuador, maybe some differences between the two partners over the years?
Absolutely. So, from my understanding, in previous years and decades ago, Ecuador used to work in multiple sites around the country. However, in the past years, we've really consolidated and focused our efforts to partner with universities. The Ecuadorian government has changed its requirements for English education for university students and also for Ecuadorian students who want to study abroad. So maybe they want to get their master's or their PhD in Europe or the US. So they have upped the requirements that students have to fulfill, and we've been able to partner with universities who have this demand by students for high-level English classes by providing native speakers. So I think it's a great partnership, and we're contributing to the academic development of students and also the professional development of people who have careers and are looking to, again, study abroad, study a master's, and just improve their English for business purposes as well.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay, for that elaboration. Our next part of our webinar takes us to funding and support for the volunteer. We'll kind of go about this both ways for our Ecuador and Namibia program. In Namibia, the Ministry of Education there subsidizes the program fees, which, as we go over, is over $10,000 per teacher. So basically, the Ministry of Education will provide a subsidy, and the volunteer pays a remainder, which is $2,490 plus airfare. With our Ecuador program at SEC and ILE, they subsidize the program fees as well, and the volunteer pays the remainder of $2,190 plus airfare. So there's a list that's very extensive about what the volunteer fee covers. So we look at the volunteer fees. We have your visa sponsorship, your housing, your living stipend, health and emergency evacuation insurance, orientation and training conferences, field staff, a remote education department that provides resources, both lesson plans and ways to create professional learning communities, engaging everyone involved in, which help you engage everyone involved in the education of your students inside of your community. We'll touch more on the training aspects next, which is a major pillar of our volunteer support, but the fees cover a lot of different parts, as you can see on the page here. So, volunteer support and orientation training. So many people who I see in outreach, and I'm sure that are attending here, if they haven't thought about this, what a concern could be is they've never taught before. How will they know what to do? The majority of WorldTeach volunteers over the years are not trained teachers, and we recognize that. Therefore, we take their orientation training very seriously, which is the first 3 to 4 weeks upon arriving in country, currently happening in Ecuador. The group will have extensive teacher training sessions each day, and then we'll complete a short teaching practicum. They receive feedback on their teaching from fellow volunteers and field staff. Volunteers will also receive a curriculum that has been designed specifically for the schools and students that we teach in both Namibia and Ecuador. Each volunteer is also part of a professional development community, as mentioned, and has the support of our education department here in our U.S. office, who will check up on you throughout your time of service and provide resources and answer any questions you may have. During orientation, volunteers will also have daily language classes to help both with learning of Spanish and the local tribal dialects that are prevalent in Namibia. This was for Gabriela, but Lindsay, I'll defer to you right now. You're currently conducting an orientation with our Ecuador volunteers. Would you like to share some insight into how it's going and maybe some fun activities that you've done away from what's just on the screen here?
Of course, and Lauren was actually one of my volunteers as well, so she can add some elaboration on orientation. But currently, we are in our first full week of orientation. I think it's very intense in a great way. A lot of information. They learn about teaching. They learn about culture, safety, and security, and then they do a practice teaching with local Ecuadorian high school students. This past Saturday, we also went on a walking tour of Quito's historical district, a lot of colonial churches, and we learned about the history, and then we were able to tour the Ecuadorian presidential palace, which is the President Correa's place of residence. So we definitely try and integrate some weekend outings to museums and cultural spaces, just to sort of give a break from the sessions during the week. But I think it's a great time for students, or excuse me, volunteers to learn, and also to create cohort rapport. So I think it's a really important part to start off that cohort support in orientation that really is maintained throughout their service.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Emily, over kind of to Namibia, what was the most useful part of your orientation, your OR, before you began your teaching experience in Namibia?
Yeah, I think one of the main things is just developing that rapport with the other volunteers, because, and of course Brett, who is our field director, because that is, you know, a huge resource throughout the year from a social standpoint, and also, you know, sharing kind of learning points with your, you know, getting immersed in the program and teaching, and also it was a huge value for my group that our field director, Brett, had been a volunteer for the past 2 years. So he could tell us, you know, exactly, you know, what we could expect in the classroom and the culture, and really understood a lot of the nuances of what we would be experiencing that, you know, there's not really, you kind of just have to experience those for yourself, but at least having someone who's been there for 2 years to walk you through that. So, you know, obviously the training and the language program was valuable too, but I think those just relationships and learning firsthand experiences was most valuable to me.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Emily. Next, with volunteer support, we talk about teaching placements. So if and when you're accepted into a WorldTeach program, you will find and fill out a volunteer profile form where you list your preferences on the age students you want to teach, what subjects you'd want to teach, and what sort of environment you want to be placed based upon your preferences and experiences. Your country director will then place you according to where he or she thinks you'll be the most successful. Lauren, can you describe your teaching assignment at SEC and what the placement was like?
Yeah, so I was placed in Quito at SEC, and I was teaching an advanced level of English called Academic 3. So SEC kind of chose our classroom placements based on our prior experience and abilities and preferences, which was really, really nice because I wanted to be working with a more advanced group. And it was also really nice in Quito to have a homestay already arranged for me. And so I really enjoyed knowing exactly where I was going to be placed when I applied to the program, and also immediately when I got there, kind of being able to get used to the school and get used to SEC.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Lauren. To Brett, quickly, in Namibia, would you like to share how you went about, especially as the country director, finding the proper placements for volunteers and agreeing upon the scope of work they would do in their community?
Yeah, so WorldTeach vets our schools in collaboration with the regional partners. So there on your screen you can see these those 5 areas. Those are regions in Namibia, and so we have partnered with those regions mostly in the last 5 years. And so in collaboration with the regional directors of education, they submit a list of schools that they would like assistance in, and then WorldTeach conducts a visit to those schools if we haven't been there before. And you know, during that visit, we kind of just talk about the needs, what subject area needs there are, what extracurricular needs there are. We look at the housing and kind of evaluate all of those things, and then we kind of compile a long list of the schools, and then the volunteers compile their volunteer profile form, and we try to match the volunteers to a good fit. one thing is, kind of unpredictable with the Namibia program is just exactly what the specifics are going to be of the time frame of teaching and how many classes, what age group, and particular subjects. So we do ask that volunteers be flexible, but for the most part, we have a good idea that volunteers will be working with English as a subject, and then doing, after-school clubs, whether it be HIV and AIDS, girls clubs on health and things like that, working in the library, and computer literacy we've tried to implement throughout all of our programs there. Yeah, it's kind of a collaboration between all the different partners that we work with to find a good fit for the volunteers and meet the local need.
Thank you, Brett. To the next part here, we're going to talk a bit about the resources that will be available in your school, some cultural challenges inside of the communities you'll be placed, and this TEFL certification as an option for doing a WorldTeach program. Lindsay, can you share some or what the classroom resources are like at SEC and ILE?
Yeah, absolutely. So in SEC, it's part of the National Polytechnic University. So there's actually 3 different buildings where volunteers teach. Every building differs a little bit. In one of the buildings, it's a little more basic. You have a whiteboard. You have access to a boombox to play video pieces and segments. You'll have Wi-Fi in the classroom, and then you'll have tables and seats. In another building, they've actually implemented smart boards. So you might be able to have access to that kind of technology to teach in your classroom. And then in the other building, you might have a computer and a projector. Similar for ELAE, some of the rooms come with computers and projectors, so you can implement media, audio, visual. But more or less, some of the buildings and spaces are a little bit basic, but volunteers are definitely creative and resourceful in how they use those.
Thank you, Lindsay. Emily, in Namibia, can you speak a bit about what the culture was like in your school in Amono? Did you witness any corporal punishment or deference to authority in your school? And also, with those questions, I'd love for you to elaborate a little bit on the resources you had available in your school as well.
Okay. So, yes, as far as the culture in the school, so Imono is a small village, but it was only a couple miles from one of the, I don't want to say city because that will give the wrong idea if you're thinking American terms, but a city in the northern part of Namibia. So we were close enough to town to get, groceries and that sort of thing. And so that sort of affected the culture some. But yes, there definitely was corporal punishment at the school. And so that's definitely something that you have to be prepared for, and also know how you're going to handle those situations. It is something we addressed a lot in orientation, and kind of obviously got good ideas and thoughts from Brett, and then just good discussions around those. And I think you have to be aware of not going in. Obviously, that's not something you're ever going to participate in, but have to go in and not just have the mindset of my Western ideas. I'm going to impart them on everyone, and change the ways of things I think are not done the way they should be. And so that's something to kind of, I guess, be cautious of. And then definitely, as far as you said, a deference to authority, yeah, that is somewhat of a culture thing there. So definitely present. And resources, we had very minimal resources at my school. And that's, Brett mentioned kind of diversity amongst different schools and placements. That was definitely the case among myself and other volunteers. So some volunteers might be in a school that has, was one of the Millennium Challenge schools, and so they had computers and smart boards, although they may not have been kept up to date and used properly. And then others like mine, it was, just a little more bare bones, so concrete floor, chalkboard, a lot of broken windows. We did end up getting some donations of laptop computers, and also some additional funds from the Ministry of Education to outfit a computer lab. So that changed significantly over the course of my time there, and that allowed us to kind of expand the ICT training for our students. But yes, overall, very, very minimal resources.
Thank you, Emily. Just curious, Emily or Lauren, did you take part in the TEFL certification during your teaching experience?
Yes, I did.
I also did.
Oh, okay, great. Lauren, can you first start kind of talking about some of the requirements you had before your departure or pre-departure requirements of the TEFL certification?
Yeah, so pre-departure requirements included observing 14 hours in a TEFL classroom. So we did those 14 hours of observation and filled out a packet about that. And then upon arrival, every month we had to complete a lesson plan and send that into the WorldTeach headquarters. And we also had to complete a case study in which we would read an article, analyze it, and then answer some reflection questions about that. And some of the topics included things such as classroom management, sexual harassment in the school, and it was, for me, it was really, really helpful to have the TEFL program be something ongoing throughout my service that engaged me in a constant learning process. So I really enjoyed the TEFL program.
Thank you, Lauren.
Yeah,
Emily, yeah,
sorry.
please go ahead. No, that's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, my experience was similar. One thing I would add is we had to do I think twice, we had to do a recording of ourselves teaching a lesson and then like an evaluation of that. So that was, again, like Lauren said, having that as a sort of self-awareness and self-assessment throughout the program kept you really constantly trying to improve your skills as a teacher and, consider new ways to approach the content.
Great, thank you. Thank you both for sharing that information. I'm glad it was Kismet that you had both done the certification and you found it was practically used during your time as a teacher in the classroom during your time in Namibia and Ecuador.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought reading the case studies, especially throughout my service, really helped me. Being able to read them and then apply them in the classroom was very helpful.
I agree. Very practical.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Lauren and Emily. Next topic we have is housing in both Ecuador and Namibia. Lindsay, can you talk about the housing provided to the SEC and ILE volunteers in Quito and Riobamba? What does that look like for them?
For both the SEC and the ILE volunteers, we as field staff find host families and vet host families for host family stays. In the Ecuador program, volunteers at their mid-service conference, halfway through their service, are allowed to move out independently of their host family if they choose to do so. I would say a majority of our WorldTeach families are long-term, long-time host families who've been hosting for years, and I think we have a really great network of host families. We often get word-of-mouth recommendations from current host families of family, friends that they would recommend. But field staff, we go and visit, we see the physical location, and then we meet and chat to vet the host families as well. I would say majority, might be houses, might be apartments, sort of middle class, and yeah, we have widows who live by themselves, and we also have, nuclear families of a mom, dad with kids. So it just sort of varies.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Lindsay. So Brett, what sort of basic amenities did Namibia volunteers have in their housing placements?
So the housing varies from, kind of your host family to government housing, I guess, are the two different housing. But what WorldTeach looks for is, a WorldTeach volunteer will have a private bedroom that has a lock, running water, and kind of a secure location that we're comfortable with. The ministry provides furniture such as a bed and stove and those basic items that you need for living, but typically the housing is fairly minimal. There are instances where volunteers wouldn't have all of the amenities, but we would never place somebody there that wasn't comfortable with that. We always check with volunteers if there isn't, like, for instance, like running water in the house where you have to fetch water outside. We kind of clear that with volunteers before they even come to country once we're placing them in their placement. So it ranges a lot, but the housing is pretty basic. But I would say the majority of volunteers are very happy with their housing, whether it be with a host family or in the government housing.
Thank you, Brett. Lauren, was there a payment structure you had between you and your host family when you were in Ecuador? How did that work?
Yeah, so our contract stated that we would pay our host families $250 a month, and that we would pay that at the end of the month. And so we typically received our stipends around the 15th of the month when they came regularly. So for my personal host family, I would just pay them the $250 once I received it out of my bank account, but it was fine for volunteers to also wait until the end of the month.
Great, thank you, Lauren. Next part of the webinar we're going to look at is the daily life both in and outside of the classroom. Starting with community involvement, this goes to Emily. Emily, how did you immerse yourself and stay involved in your local community in Namibia?
So a lot of that for me ended up happening through the school project that I ended up taking on with that computer lab, because that was pretty intensive and kind of included completely remodeling this room, putting tile down, painting, purchasing blinds, all kinds of stuff. So I worked with, some older students helped with it, some members of the community that, lived nearby in the village, and that became, several weekends, we'd spend just in the classroom working on whatever project needed to be done. So that was a good way to, contribute to the school and also have time outside of, just the school day to be working with community members and, I guess getting to know them a little bit better.
Okay, great, Emily. Lauren, how did you use your stipend in Ecuador? Did you find it was enough to live off of?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially living with a host family, things were pretty cheap. If you eat in-house a lot, you shouldn't have a problem at all living off of your stipend. I did need to bring some extra money because I knew that I wanted to do a lot of traveling, but yeah, my stipend covered everything that I needed for daily life in Quito.
Great. Lindsay, just going over as far as safety, what type of safety precautions do you preface during orientation and with current volunteers in general?
So I think, Quito especially, it's a huge city. It's almost 3 million people. So I think we talk about a lot of the major risk factors of living in a big city and not being familiar with that city, that country, that language, that culture. I think we emphasize a lot of safety based on transportation. So taking public transportation, we talk about, taking taxis, what to look for in a safe taxi, and then sort of appropriate hours and places that volunteers can walk. So, we talk about parks as a really great space, but then these certain streets after, 8, 10 o'clock at night, preferable to avoid. So I think a lot of it's based on just being alert and aware of living in a foreign city.
Great, thank you, Lindsay. To Brett now, what are some similarities you found between the U.S. and Namibia, and also maybe a couple of differences that you saw too?
And that's a tough one. I mean, I think I think everyone has maybe just like a view that, or maybe just a story, that kind of shows like maybe their ignorance or just kind of unknowing, kind of going into the unknown. I think for me personally, that story is, I brought a bunch of like razors to Namibia, thinking that maybe in my village I wasn't going to be able to buy razors, and so I think when you get there, you realize, oh well, I can Namibia has a lot of similarities to the United States. I can buy a razor not only in town where I go to get groceries, but even in my village at the little general store, they might have small items like that. So Namibia, was very similar to the U.S. It's has a connection with South Africa, so you can find a lot of basic goods there. And we had a lot of time for cooking, so you could find the ingredients to cook just about anything you wanted. Nothing was pre-packaged or anything like that, but you could typically find whatever you wanted to make, whatever food you wanted to, if you were craving tacos or something like that. So yeah, a lot of similarities. The one difference I think that stands out to me is just a sense of community and kind of sharing there at the school. I mean, I know at my school there was a very kind of tight-knit group of teachers, and when you're there, you're kind of eating lunch together. People are sharing their food with you and kind of welcoming you. I think that's a little different than an American work environment, and also just a sense of time. I mean, I think this is common in many countries we work in, but things are very kind of laid back. There's not a rush to get started on time or get something done immediately. Everything kind of has its kind of plays out in Africa time is kind of how people describe it. And so overall, a lot of similarities. And I think in coming, I could ramble on a lot, but in coming back to the United States, I really realized that it had a lot of similarities. I'm from the Midwest, and kind of the neighborliness, the love for being outside, even barbecuing, those things. Like I think I really loved that about Namibia. And then in moving to Boston, I realized, it maybe wasn't that I fit in well in Namibia. It was that they shared a lot of similar values to me growing up in the Midwest that I think is just important to kind of see. It was important for me to see from the perspective of living here on the East Coast. And so I hope that answers your question.
No, it does, Brett. I always love hearing your comparisons to where you grew up to your time in Namibia. So that certainly never gets old. I think that's great that you draw those parallels to it, and that stays with you. So this next question was for Gabby, but of course this will go to Lindsay. Lindsay, where are some places that volunteers usually explore or travel to when they're not teaching, when they're in Ecuador?
Yeah, so in both SEC and ELA, the volunteers teach for approximately 8 weeks, and then they'll have a 1 to 2 week cycle break that they don't have to teach. So I think volunteers do a wonderful job of taking advantage of the sites and destinations of Ecuador. And this might sound like a tourism plug, but Ecuador is a wonderfully diverse place to visit. So the volunteers are all located in the highlands, and so oftentimes during the cycle breaks, they'll go to the coastal region. There are beautiful beaches, very diverse beaches along the coast, and then they might also visit the Amazon jungle, which is to the east. And then every highland town is a little different, so they'll travel a lot in the highlands as well. And then you also have the Galapagos. So if they choose to stay in Ecuador, there's lots of traveling to be done, and then sometimes volunteers will also go to Peru and Colombia as popular destinations.
Awesome. Thanks, Lindsay. So to look here quickly, we'll kind of go over at this point the application process. So as you look on the screen here, there's requirements of 18 to 74 years old. So that 18 is put in there because we have a Namibia summer program, which departs in early June and has a deadline of May 1st. But for our year-long programs, it's 21 to 74 and a bachelor's degree required. You have to be native or fluent English speaker. Again, for summer programs, you should be a current college student or older. For our year-long programs that require a bachelor's degree, there's no teaching experience necessary, but a commitment to serve and learn, flexibility, patience, and an open-minded attitude. And there's no local language fluency required, but a lot of the potential applicants I speak to, I definitely tell them that we provide some resources to them, but also to do some diligence and use resources such as Duolingo before they're actually departing for their time of service. Your items needed during the application is your resume, a personal statement, and transcript. Your transcript is not required for our summer programs, and then 2 letters of recommendation are required for being submitted by the recommenders, and for our summer program, only 1 is required. The program dates and deadlines, you apply to the country program of your choice. If you're on here, whether that's Ecuador or Namibia, applications are accepted on a rolling basis, and the decision is usually made 2 to 3 weeks after your application is fully complete. We do have some upcoming deadlines for our Namibia and Ecuador programs of October 15th, about 3 weeks from today. Namibia departure is in late December 2016, and as mentioned, our summer program for Namibia departs in early June 2017. Ecuador departure for this particular group is in the middle of February of 2017. So quickly right now, something as kind of the final part of our webinar before we get to our question and answer session from our audience. We'd like to, at WorldTeach, announce that for the first time in our 30-year history, we have created a Global Education Fellowship. We are in the midst of updating our website and our various online resources, but you can email info@worldteach.org for more information. This Global Education Fellowship will focus on the intersections of globalization, education, and national development in the 21st century. Professional development opportunity is ideal for someone who has either existing professional work experience or prior international experience through academic study or work. This fellowship is designed to deepen each fellow's abilities to compete in the global marketplace, as well as to be change agents and advocates for student-centered, effective education systems worldwide, regardless of one's ultimate goals in their professional development. As you can see on here, as far as the professional development that accompanies this fellowship, there's an intercultural development assessment, a research or reflection project that the fellow does, professional development workshops and seminars, a TEFL certification that is done and required of all of our fellows. There's your post-fellowship career mentoring, monthly living expenses that are provided for you abroad, and international airfare, overseas travel insurance, and visa that are included. And you get access to our WorldTeach Global Network of 7,000 alumni. And we have departures for this fellowship happening in November and December of 2016, with the July 2017 return. So again, for those who potentially are interested in that, we will have more information over the coming days that will be posted to our website. But if there's any immediate questions, you can certainly email info@worldteach.org. Now for some questions and answers session for our panelists. I'll go to Lauren quickly. Lauren, what's one thing you wish you knew before you volunteered in Ecuador?
I guess I wish I had known more about the age range of my students, because I taught everyone from high schoolers up through adults, which I was really excited about. I was really, really happy to be working with adults, but I do wish that I had had more information about that before departing. What else? I think that's the biggest thing, is more about the resources at the school and more about the age range of my students.
Okay, thank you, Lauren. I think we've actually lost Emily for a second. Let's see if any other questions have come in. Go to Lindsay. Lindsay, what are things future volunteers in Ecuador can do to prepare before they depart? This can include maybe certain items that they should bring, maybe articles, articles they can read, documentaries to watch, or books to read. Any recommendations from your experience that they should do to prepare?
Yeah, I think, There are a spectrum of things that I think they could do. One thing, music is really, really big here in dancing. So even something as small as listening to Spanish language music, finding out about local artists, buying some CDs and listening to those can be great. There's also the Ecuador Reader. It's a book. It's an anthology, and it covers history, politics, language, sociology, anthropology, and so it's a really great resource to start learning about Ecuador. And then I think there are some great documentaries out there, several in particular that focus on conservation efforts, what's been going on in the past decades in the Amazon and oil companies. So I definitely think learning about that and learning about what's happened and what's currently going on to sort of combat issues that they've had in the past. So yeah, movies, books, music. If you can get your hand on any Ecuadorian food in the U.S., that's always a good thing. But just anything you can get your hands on, I think, would be a good resource.
Okay, awesome, Lindsay. Thank you. Any one documentary you would, by name, that you would recommend?
Yeah, it's I guess it's not old at this point, but it's been out for several years. The documentary Crude, C-R-U-D-E, it talks about the Chevron Texaco presence in the Amazon jungle here in Ecuador. I highly recommend it. It sort of introduces, the cross and the conflict between, conserving national Amazon areas and then with oil and petroleum extraction and development.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks, Lindsay. And this question was going to be for Emily, but Emily had to go to class early. So I'll go over to Brett. Brett, from your time in Namibia, and you spent a significant amount of 4 years, is there one aspect of your personality that you feel changed after your time there in Namibia?
Man, you're giving me the tough ones.
Hard love, yeah.
My experience in Namibia was extremely impactful to me. I think in working with everybody that I worked with, from my school to the regional librarians or administrators, volunteers, and other partners that WorldTeach has there, just how much work it is to do international development, and to see it from the classroom level to the highest levels of the Ministry of Education. I think just really gave me a lot of perspective in the challenges that are happening in international development, and just the amazing people that are working in this area, education in particular. And so to me, it just helps me kind of have perspective going forward, that people, if you're on the ground level, you're only seeing a very small window into what's happening in an area, and the more perspective you can have, and the more communication you can have with all the different partners that are involved in some sort of activity, just the better understanding you have of it. And I think as a young, 25-year-old first going there, I didn't have a lot of perspective. I thought I knew a lot, and it's really good just to learn from that experience, and I've found it, something that I can kind of take to everything that I do, just to have that perspective of the challenges, and just how hard people are working to really make the world a better place.
Oh, that was a great answer. Thank you. Thanks, Brett. We appreciate you sharing your thoughts on that. As we go through right now, we've come to the conclusion of our webinar, Discovering Global Classrooms and Communities, and some next steps that you can take if you're out there listening as an attendee. There's alumni reviews of all of our programs, which are housed on gooverseas.com. You can email admissions@worldteach.org to speak with a country expert from either Namibia or Ecuador. We have a whole YouTube channel where you can explore day in the life videos of various volunteers. And then more information at worldteach.org, especially in the next couple days with the new announcement of this global education fellowship that we will be starting in Ecuador too. You can also find us all over social media, YouTube videos as mentioned, Twitter kind of updates of what we're doing day to day, LinkedIn with any relevant articles and business developments that we have, Instagram where we have our alumni take over on a weekly basis, and Facebook for all different announcements. So besides that, thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope to see you either in Ecuador or Namibia very soon. Thanks again.